Hello, hello. I'm so happy to be here. I'm honoured to be sharing this space with so many amazing people. This evening, I'm talking about wound talking and how by talking to our wounds we can change our lives and we can change our thought process. And it might be as simple as a word or phrase that we heard, it whispers or the echo comes through our lives, and it can affect us. And we at this moment are living in the most amazing time. It's an incredible time, an incredible opportunity that we've got, that we're able to heal these wounds. We're able to break the chains that have trapped us for a lifetime. And we're also given this incredible opportunity not to just do it for us, but to do it for our children and our children's children. Perhaps you might have these amazing ideas and intentions and get stuck. And this is what I do, and this is how I help people. And I'm honoured every single time because I watch people change right in front of my eyes. My first book was called Finding Lily. It fell out of me when I was sat on a beach in Greece. As my life was crashing around me, I was desperately trying to hold on to it, pull it all together through fear. And with that came some very intense emotions. And what I began to realise over a long period of time is I could utilise my intuitive healing skills. So I was there for 5 weeks. The first week I was with my children, but I was self-isolating. I hadn't any idea at the time why. And as I said, this story fell out of me. I thought it was a story that had come for healing. It was something that I'd addressed a few years before, but I thought it would come back for healing. But I've only discovered, and this is very, very recently, that actually it was an echo. It was an echo from my past. It was at that point, 26 years I'd experienced it, 26 years prior that I'd experienced it. And as I started to write, I could see the parallels in the relationships that I was living. Very recently, something else has happened, and I was getting this other story, another story came through, and I suddenly realised that actually the story of Finding Lily was actually telling me what was going on in my relationship. And as I said, it was out there for 5 weeks. When we got back, the inevitable happened. My life crashed around me, but it was the first time I'd been able to breathe in a very long time. So let me introduce myself. My name's Elizabeth. I'm a woundologist. I'm the founder of the Inner Healing Sanctuary. I'm also an unintentional author and a speaker. I'm the creator of WoundTalking, The Original Wound, and Quantum Glow. I've been working with wounds since 2002. I studied past life energetics. This was just following the breakdown of my first marriage, and I got drawn into that area and working with wounds. I started studying epigenetics in 2010 and healing ancestral wounds around 2013. And then after my marriage broke down, as a Reiki master teacher, I was teaching, and during the period of 2017 and 2018, every single person that came in for training had experienced emotional abuse, and that is when I decided to pivot towards that area and work more with the wounds. As I said, I'm an unintentional author of Finding Lily, of the A to Z of emotional abuse and divorce matters. And so it was during this time, over the next months and years, that I discovered this new language. I discovered these new words like triangulation. I knew some of them, but I didn't fully understand what they were, what it was. Triangulation, gaslighting, mindfuckery, which is the title of my podcast. I learned about abusive cycles, and I learned that not all salads are healthy. I'd worked with wounds at that point for about 15 years. And so I knew there was a different message in here for me. I knew there was something else that I could learn and I could share. I started a YouTube channel, and over a Christmas period, I recorded the A to Z. These were the terms that I was having to go and find out what it was, what this term meant. So I thought, if I can put it all together. From there, I wrote an article for Thrive Global, and that was on the same subject. And then I got a message saying, I hope this is going to be your next book. Now, I had actually been in the process of writing another book called The Effing Pink Umbrella, and maybe that's something that I write at a different time. As I went through the inevitable divorce, I realised that the legal team can enable the abuser to carry out that abuse. So I continued to write my book, and during that time I was able to reclaim so many missing parts. As my divorce was finalising, I realised that my book was being published. It was with an editor, so I had a bit of time on my hands, and I was still raw with these very specific emotions and this manipulation that took place. So I set out to write another book, and that was called 3 Things You Should Never Do, Divorcing a Narcissist. But that remained stuck on my laptop. It never really moved. And once I'd finally did the healing on the emotional wounds, I decided it would actually be more helpful and more productive to write something that was more supportive of that manipulation that happens. And I wanted to guide and offer sage advice, the different healing practices that are available. Emotional wounds are like physical wounds. They hurt. They can't be seen, but they are as damaging, if not more damaging. When I trained as a spiritual life coach in 2010, I also trained as a soul plan reader, but also in theta healing. And we live as children in a theta state up until the first 7 to 8 years of our lives. And this means that everything we hear, everything we feel, everything we see, we take on as the truth. It's a hypnotic state. We as adults experience this at night when we go to sleep. We will go into a theta state at some point, and when we meditate. But a child lives there. They have no idea what they're witnessing isn't the truth. They have no idea that some of these emotions might be painful to them. Our tribe are molding us, whether that's in a religious or political way, but they're guiding us with their thoughts and feelings. A baby knows. A baby knows how to survive. It's got an inner warning system. It knows how to ask for what it needs. It knows how to tell us it's hungry, tell us it's tired, tell us it needs a nappy changing when it wants contact. Our wounds can be created wittingly, unwittingly, subconsciously by our parents and our caregivers, the people around us, and that can be our teachers as well. We can be repeating the patterns that our parents maybe unknowingly accepted. These are like gifts that are handed down. It can come from unemotional or emotionally unavailable parents. A child needs to be seen and heard, and that over the last 10 years is the biggest message that I have received. We need to be seen and heard, and we can be held back by these wounds, these emotional wounds. It's an echo from our childhood. It might be the sound of a voice. It might be a phrase that was repeated throughout our childhood. We actually have 3 core wounds: abandonment, shame, and betrayal. And as I went through my divorce, I was discovering a lot of tools that I had for years that were able to help me through this period. I, at the time, had been running an energy course, and I realised I was suffering really badly with rumination. It was something I wanted to experience. I wanted to fully immerse myself in this experience. I wanted to feel every single emotion, every wound. I wanted to leave no stone untouched. From the story of finding Lily, I'd realised that I was repeating the patterns, and I wanted to stop that. So I was running this energy course, and I was teaching grounding and breathing, and what I realized was when I was getting these emails and I was getting these letters through, I wasn't going into rumination as badly. So I realized being in my body and out of my head was the safest place to be. Before, I could be found on the sofa for like 4 or 5 days, going over the same statements, looking for the information. And this is what I discovered. Our brains, when we hear something, our brains go off. They go through this filing cabinet, searching for the examples of when we were, when we did, when we said, and how we behave in certain ways. And these are the messages that we've been fed through our childhood, through growing up. And not all of them are deep rooted, but the original wounds are. The original wound is where it all starts. And for anyone who's experienced anything like emotional abuse, there are a lot more than we believe and that we know about. Emotional abuse is well hidden. We believe, and this is what kept us in relationships. The original wound feels familiar. It's where we've known this wound intimately. It's the voices that we will not challenge. They're like old friends. They repeat to us many, many times a day. We believe they're keeping us safe. And so why would we question them? It's the programming that's installed at an early age. This is the theta effect. And you might recognize this, particularly if you are a mother, and you might hear, this is my experience anyway. I vowed that I was never going to parent like my mother. And then one day I was halted in my tracks as these words left my mouth, and I knew they weren't mine, and I knew where they'd come from. And that is the theta effect. This is the programming, what we see, what we hear, what we feel. It all happens in that time. So the wounds of our mothers and the wounds of our fathers are passed on to us. They are perhaps believed to be gifts, but they're not. And if we're lucky, maybe our parents questioned the upbringing that they had and the way that they were treated and said, I'm not behaving in the same way. And they gave their children a different childhood. And this is what I talk about in my book, The A to Z of Emotional Abuse. I did a lot of healing around my 3-year-olds, my 5-year-olds, and my 8-year-olds, and that just wasn't one. There were multiple. And as I said, I've worked over 22 years with wounding. And it's led me to realise that when we experience some form of trauma, now that could be somebody shouting at us, it could be witnessing something and us feeling unsafe, part of our psyche breaks away as a self-preservation. And it's attempting to keep us whole at that point. Remember, we're born to survive. As babies, we know how to survive. We learn so many different techniques as we grow. And one of the most and oldest ones is that it's so unsafe to be kicked out of our tribe. It means death to us. How would we survive? Where would we get our protection from? How would we eat and sleep? Where would we find food? We learn to adapt in an unsafe environment. And it's my belief that's where the empath comes from. It's the child that learned to hone their gifts, protecting themselves. And this is the place that we learn how to form. Now, not all wounds run as deeply as the childhood wounds. And one experience I did have was although my marriage was very short, the programming had been very deep and the tapping into the wounds had been very successful. But one day I remember I was sitting on the sofa and my now ex-husband came in, and I had to go and greet him because it was the best way to deal with that. And he made some comment as I walked into the kitchen, and I remember tears pinging to the back of my eyes. And I thought, no. And I'd been working with energy for a long time. And I thought, you're not going to do this to me today. I'm not going to allow this to happen. And I took a really deep breath in. And I said to myself, no, you're not going to cry. And I put a big smile on my face. And he then hit me with some words that hurt me deeply. And he said, this is why we think you've got bipolar. The first thing that I could think of was, and I retorted, was who's we? But that thought was in my head, and everything then that happened over the next, I think it was about 5 or 6 years, I would then go off and say, well, that's probably because I've got bipolar. That's probably because I've got bipolar. And it was about 2 or 3 years ago, I was getting ready to do a live in my Facebook group, and this thought hit me, hang on a minute, our relationship was a lie. So if our relationship was a lie and most of the things that happened in it were half truths, and I knew this, it took me a long time to admit that he didn't love me. He loved what I did for him. I was holding this belief that I had bipolar, and it was gone. It never, the only time it comes back, is that story comes back, is when I talk about it. Some of these, it's so easy to move some of these beliefs. And for some statements like that, they can just disappear. Others are more deep rooted, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can, and the key here is removing these wounds right at the core. This is the original wound work. It's like a verruca. A wound is like a verruca. If we leave any part of that missing, or if we leave any of that part of that intact, it lays dormant. It's waiting for the right circumstances to happen to be triggered again. And that's exactly what a wound does. I believe we're here to heal on an extremely deep level. Everything we experience, we have got the ability to use to help us grow. And what I'm going to share with you now, if you've got a pen, you can write this down. If not, come back and re-listen to this. Is this true? Take a statement or something that you believe about yourself. It could be something that you repeat. It could be at a time when you're getting ready to launch something. It could be at a time when you're preparing for a meeting, or you get fear in a certain area. And listen to the echo, listen to the words, and then we're going to ask if they're true. You can sit, you can take a few deep breaths, but you're going to connect with yourself, and you're going to listen to the way the sentence is constructed, and then ask whether it's your voice or whether it's somebody else's. And then what happens next? It might be that you hear an intonation on a word, or it's the way that sentence is constructed that leads you to the voice or the person that told you. It could be that you're really bad with money. This is a great one, something that I heard. It could be that you're really bad with money. So once we've discovered who said it, we can then start to question, is this true? Is this true? Now, our brain is trained to go off and search for the answers, search for the scenarios. So let's get it to train for, instead of looking for the negatives, that you're really bad with money, ask yourself, is that true? And I've heard this before by a few different people. And I can say, no, it isn't true. I was left as a single parent. I built up a business in around 2008. At the time I had 3 children. 2 were living with me. My son was a bit older, and there were 3 of us, myself and my 2 daughters, were living on £25 a week for food. So I had to be creative, and I built this business from nothing. And it was something that I really regret giving up, because I gave it up for my now ex-husband. But I can go back and say, no, it's not true that I'm bad with money. It isn't true. I was able to feed my children. I was able to, and you can find the reasons. So what we're doing is we're flipping everything around. We're taking that statement, the statement of the negative, and asking, is that statement true? And now we're looking for everything that says, every example that we've got that says, no, that isn't true. And that is how you change. You talk to wounds. Well, that's a different way of doing it, but that is one of the ways of talking to your wounds and getting them to help you heal and change your life. I hope this has been helpful. So thank you so much for this opportunity, Cassie. I'm just honoured to be here. Thank you so, so much.